So my name is Nate Bronner. I'm a master gardener and a master naturalist with the Virginia Cooperative Extension Service. And our job is to go out and take that knowledge, that science-based education, and spread it out throughout the community. One of the big things that I get from people when we start talking about starting things from seed is people approach starting things from seed with a lot of trepidation. Now I look at this time of year and I'm like, man, this is when I start my juices get flowing. I get excited about gardening because right now is when everything is in its infancy, when I can start everything from scratch. And that's why I think people like spring so much, because everything is fresh and new. And that's what actually late winter is to me, because I'm starting all of my plants from seed myself. When I look at how much people spend and waste on food, on the food that's wasted every year, the average American spends $6,756 a year on food. Now that was back in 2011. It's probably a little bit more today. Only 756 of that is spent on fruits and vegetables, though, which is amazing when you think about that. In a healthy diet, that should really make up the bulk of the diet, but that's where we spend kind of a paltry amount. We did a survey back in 2009. 30% of US households had some sort of garden in their backyard, right? Of those gardens in 2009, the average investment that they put in either the seeds or the soil or building it was $70 into it. And out of it, they calculated the cost of the produce that they were able to take out of their garden, and it was $530 that they got out of those gardens, the average garden. Now let me make this on an economic argument to you. Our last frost around here is on April 15th, right? Our first frost of the year is usually around November 15th. That's how many months? About 7 months there. You can save a lot of money by growing your own food at home. And if you are growing from seed, boy, even more so. So why do you want to do it from seed? Why don't you just want to go down to Walmart or Home Depot or name your big box store and buy the plant off the shelf and plant that in your garden? You want to get exactly the type of fruit or vegetable that you want to grow in your yard. You can get all sorts of different flavors, even in just one type of fruit or vegetable, by going through these catalogs and looking at them. Another thing is you can go for disease resistance. So different, say, tomatoes are grown with different disease resistance. Any of you ever looked at a tomato label and it says Sweet Chelsea F1V1 at the end, and you're like, what does F1V1 mean at the end of it? Well, fusarium wilt or verticillum wilt. Those are two diseases that affect tomatoes. In my yard, I found that fusarium wilt tends to be a real problem for my tomatoes. So every time I buy a variety of tomato that I'm going to grow now, I make sure it's resistant to that, because that tends to not just stay in my beds, but it tends to float around and be in the neighbor's yard. I know it's in the environment around here, and I know other gardeners have problems with it. So if I know that that's going to be a factor, I don't want to plant a tomato that might be susceptible to that. So I plant them that are resistant to it, and my tomatoes do a lot better, and I don't have failures in the crop. You know, I plant lots of dill. Why? Because I make pickles. Why else would I plant dill? Well, it's a host plant for the eastern black swallowtail butterfly, or actually the caterpillar of the butterfly. If I want a lot of butterflies in my yard, I need to make sure I have the host plant there. So I plant tons of dill. Why? Because I know some of the dill and the parsley is going to get denuded. That's okay, because I still have some more, right? So it makes it kind of nice when you can just take that, and now I can have free dill seeds, and I don't have to be buying them anymore. I just pay attention the previous year, collect them, and then I have them for the next year. All of these plants behind me are ones that I have free seeds for back there that I've harvested the seeds off. Blackberry lily, rose swamp mallow. We've got butterfly weed here. That's an ornamental pepper up there. So all of them, it's very easy to harvest the seeds from them. I'll show you how I do that as we go along here. What I want to talk a little bit more about is if I'm going to be planning ahead, and starting from seed really means planning ahead so you know when you can be successful. I need to know what my winter hardiness zone is. I need to know what zone I'm in. And right here, we're in a boundary area. We're right between zones 7 and 8. So really it depends on your climate and maybe the microclimate in your yard. Maybe you live in a hollow, or you live at kind of in a dip in the terrain where where cold air tends to hang out. So maybe you're in more of a zone 7 than your neighbor who might be higher up on the hill, and they might be in a zone 8. Now I can start planning off of that, right? So I know that if I have a plant that takes a while for it to germinate from seed, then I need to plan ahead and back off of that date. Where can you get that information? Most seed packets will tell you that information. If you pick up one of these seed packets that I made up back there, it will give you that information on it. All right? If you have seeds and you look at the seed packet and it's not a very informative one, guess what? All you have to do is go Google it, and there are a lot of seed companies out there that will give you the germination times for different species, and by and large, you can take a look at that and you can get some really good data from that. But you really want to plan it ahead so you know when you're going to start your seeds. So for example, I know that it takes about 14 days for peppers to germinate. So 2 weeks ago, before this class, I planted some peppers and eggplants. Okay, now it's a little bit early. I can make up for that, but I started germinating peppers. I labeled them at the start. Why? Because I could have a photographic memory, which I don't, but I will forget at the end of planting these what I planted over here. By the time I get here, I might have forgotten that. It's happened before. So I label them before I start putting the seeds in. Now I know what's in the different rows, because I know that in a week from now, or 2 weeks, or when it comes time to plant them in the garden, if I don't have it labeled, I'm not going to remember that, despite my best intentions. So you guys can pass this around. Please be careful with it. But you can see the seedlings that are coming up. You will notice that those only have 2 leaves on those. So those are called cotyledons. Those are the false leaves. But all the energy for that is already there in the seed when you take that seed out. Those are only there long enough to produce the photosynthesis that it needs, so that plant has the energy to put out the true leaves for the plant, and then that starts going from there. So those only are there to get a jump start, and then they start taking off from that. There are other techniques that you can do. I'm going to be mostly going on about this technique today, but I wanted to show you, I used a soil blocking technique on this because right now is a great time to be having cool season vegetables like spinach. I've got about, 40 spinach seedlings in here of 2 different varieties because I labeled these 2 right on here. So I remember which varietals they are, right? So I can take these spinach seedlings and put them outside and plant them in my garden. In fact, these are a little bit past where I would do that. By the way, I planted these you can tell the difference between these. Spinach germinates a lot faster. These I also planted about 2 weeks ago, and you can see that the true leaves are coming out on them as the cotyledons are getting ready to fade on them. You can see this is an old picture of what my seed starting used to look like. I do another thing when I start seeds sometimes. If I'm not sure what the germination rate is going to be like on the seedlings, like I grew some Thai chili peppers last year, and I didn't use all of the peppers, and some of them have desiccated and dried out, so I harvested the seeds from them. I took one tiny Thai chili pepper, really tiny. I broke it open, and there were maybe 30 seeds that came out of it because they're just chock full of seeds, and I threw them into a substance called vermiculite. So what I want to do is kind of go through a simple checklist on what you need to be successful with gardening. We won't go through tons of slides, but here's the list right here of really what you need to get going. And the first thing I'd like to talk about is a growing medium and what you want to be using. There are some people, you don't need soil necessarily to use for growing. You can do hydroponics. But the techniques I'm going to tell you are for a soil or soil-like substance. A lot of times when you go to buy a bag of dirt, or soil in the store, you'll see garden soil or you'll see potting soil. When you're going to do seed starting, you want a mix that is specifically for potting or for seed starting. Okay, you do not want garden soil. The reason for that is garden soil has a lot of either cocoa peat or peat moss in it. It doesn't smell like anything. It's very light, but it's very absorbent of water. And so it'll hold on to that water and then release it to the roots. It's got a huge concentration of that, very little compost in it. And then it'll have some stuff like either vermiculite or perlite, two very similar substances. I pass around the vermiculite back there. It'll have that mixed into it, and that's what will be in it. But the majority of it will be this peat moss because it keeps it nice and light and airy. Because roots need nutrients from the soil, right? They need water, but they also need air. And if you have that soil compacted and it can't breathe, or you keep it too waterlogged, that plant's going to die. So any seeds that you start need to have a nice light potting medium. Now, what they don't need is a lot of fertilizer in there. Okay, so don't go picking your potting soil or your potting mix based on it's got fertilizer and it'll feed it for 3 months. Your seedlings don't need that. Okay, especially not starting out. They need a nice mix of the peat moss, a little bit of compost in there, a little bit of perlite or vermiculite, and they'll be good to go. Then the next thing is, what do you put them in? Probably most of us have bought things in these plastic pony packs before. That'll work just fine. You can plant things in larger plastic pots like this. That's fine, but just remember, every piece of plastic that we've ever made in the world still exists. It just is broken down into smaller pieces, and it's starting to become a little bit more of a problem. So I tend to not go for that. What I like is, I like solutions that are number one, effective, and number two, cheap, right? And so I go with something that's really simple. Most of us, even if we don't get the newspaper anymore, can still access newspaper somehow. I pay about 18 or 20 bucks for one of these paper pot makers. It lasts me for years and years. I cut this into strips. Then I just wrap it around this, like so. I twist in the bottom. Take the base, and then I slide it off. And now I have a paper pot that will biodegrade in the soil. It does not interfere with the roots. If the roots start going through this, I've got to disturb the roots to get it out of here. This, I can just put this into the soil. It won't interfere with root growth at all. This will just break down, and it will last long enough for me to grow it. You saw my tray back there. That will last until April, until it's time to put it in. Now, by April, it'll be coming out of that, but it'll last that long. I don't need it to last longer than that. Maybe I need to pot it up into something a little bit more durable. This will also break down in the soil. And I got off of one of these catalog places, I think I got 100 of these for 10 bucks, right? So 10 cents a piece. And this will break down in the soil. The roots can go through this, can just plant the whole thing into the soil if I want, and it's good to go, and I'm not contributing to more plastic waste. Most of the stuff that we're going to talk about here today is kind of seed starting 101, but occasionally you'll hear terms like scarification or stratification. Scarification means sometimes some of the seeds that we get have a really tough coat on them, right, to protect the seed. And in order for that to start, in order for the seed to start growing, it needs to have that coating broken down. So some of them need some sort of scarification, whether that is soaking them in warm water for a while to break that down. Peas, beans, that's a great thing to do. You take water coming out of your hot water at your house is probably about 120 degrees. You could even make it a little bit warmer than that. You soak it in it for an hour for if I'm going to grow legumes, if I'm going to grow, that's peas or beans, if I'm going to grow squash, if I'm going to do cucumbers, I'll always do this with them. I'll soak them for about an hour first. Now, don't put it on the stove and then heat it up with the seeds in it. Take that hot water out of the tap, put put it in a little container, drop the seeds into it. An hour later, you take that and you plant it. And for some of them, like the peas and the beans, you'll actually see it start to expand as the water starts to go in there and penetrate in, and it'll start germinating almost right there in front of you. So that's a great way to do it. Some of them need to be scarified a little bit more, and that's when you put it in. If I have some, the rose swamp mallows are a good example of this. They have a very tough exterior. So even after I do that, they might still not be enough. So I put them in a little can with some sandpaper in there, and I shake them around in that, and it nicks that seed coating. Then I can soak them in water a little bit more. That water will then get into it, and they'll germinate more. Sometimes you will see a term called cold stratification. I don't want to get too much into this, except if you're going to be doing natives, this sometimes is a factor. Some seeds that are used to cold climates need to go through a period of dormancy where they're cold for about 30 or 60 days. So what do? You know that vermiculite back there? I put them in that vermiculite, I soak it, then I take that and I put it outside, or I can put it in the fridge for 30 or 60 days. I can poke holes in it so water can pass through it, and I'll put that out in the garden. You know, maybe a spinach container will work well for that. Poke holes in it, put it outside, let it overwinter outside, and then I'll start seeing them come up in the spring around April. I can plant them out of that. It's a pretty simple way to do it. But that's a little bit more advanced. If you want to know more about that, I'm happy to talk to you more about that later, but I want to keep on with most of this. Lots of people, and me included, I've heard them say, well, I've got a sunny window. It's on the south side of the house. I'm going to just put my plants there. I'll put my seedlings there, and they'll do great. And then inevitably about 3 weeks later, I hear, and my seedlings survived. Your seedlings need light. They need a lot of light. They need 14 to 16 hours of light. And they don't just need it from a 60 or an 80 or 100 watt bulb. We used to use fluorescent bulbs because those are pretty good. The LED light bulbs these days are fantastic. I use stuff like this, although this is not the only one that does it. 4,000 lumens coming out of this. And I put it so it's right over the seedlings. I don't want to put it way up here. I put it right over the seedlings, and I put it on a timer. They get the same amount each day, and they get 14 hours of sunlight or light from this every day. That intense light that's dedicated for them is really important. You want it to be like that right there. The picture on your left is just not quite good enough, and it won't work out. So you need that dedicated light for them. It can be simple. This you can get it at big box stores around here for about 20 bucks. It's not much. And running LED lights like this, it doesn't cost you very much money. So you can do this fairly cheaply. 14 hours is really the mark that you want it to go by. I have mine come on the timer at 6 a.m. every morning, and it goes off just after 8 p.m. And it lights it up, and it goes fine. And then I don't have to remember to turn the lights on or off. Well, the other thing that you need to think about in my household is my wife got tired of me taking over every horizontal surface. She's a very forgiving person. She's wonderful, but I used to take over every horizontal surface in the household with my little seed trays. And she convinced me that there were 3 other people living in the household that might want to use some of those horizontal surfaces as well. So I made a little potting cart like this. And if you notice, I can drop that light up and down as I need to, because when the seedlings are down here on the table, I want that light right over them. If you make it too high up, they get too leggy. So you don't want to do that. I've also got a light, you can't see it on this, that's underneath, that's also, I can drop down. And so I've got the same light right underneath there. I've got an upper level and a lower level, and it works out just fine. If you don't have a seeding cart like this at home, but you really want one, New Horizons, which is a trade school down here, they do excellent work with a lot of our youngsters on the peninsula that are wanting to learn trades. They work a lot with us to produce implements that you can use in your home garden, and it doesn't cost much more than the cost of the materials, and it supports their programs there. So it's kind of a win-win. If you're not a woodworker but you want something like this, you can have the kids make it for you at New Horizons. The next thing that you need to think about is heating. Now, not everything needs heat. You remember the spinach that we passed around there? That's a cool season vegetable. Spinach, lettuce, things like that. They don't want heat. If I heat them up, they're just not going to germinate. In your handouts there, you'll see a chart just like this one in the middle here, and it tells you the ideal germination temperature. Lettuce right here, 32 degrees, all the way up here through 77 degrees, it's in the high 90s for percentage germination. I go over that and I heat it up to 86 degrees, it drops 12% germination. So it really drops off. If I look though down here at tomatoes, if I have it down below 50 degrees, they're never going to germinate. It stays pretty low at 50 degrees, but look at what happens if I bring it up into the high 70s or 80s. It's going to pop right up on me. It's very high percentage germination rates. So knowing which temperature for your seeds is super important. That's why on a lot of the packets, including these packets, it will tell you the ideal germination temperatures for your seeds. Where else can you find that? You can Google it. You can look it up in your publications that you have here. It's in the Plant Propagation from Seed. And you can also find it at the back of certain books that are very useful. Both of these charts come right out of this book. The other thing is wet. How wet do you want your seeds? Now, if you take a look at this, this is a whole, there is a lot more soil in here than what I have in this one. They're almost the same weight. This soil is not wet. This is. So you can pass these around if you'd like and feel that. Feel how heavy that is. Then the next thing, you feel how heavy this is. I do a lot of mine through a weight test. I don't stick my finger into the soil because I don't want to disturb the roots. But if I pick it up, I will get, and this you do over time, but I learn about how heavy this is and how much water it has by how much it weighs, right? And then I can tell whether I need to water it. When I water it, I don't want the water to go onto the leaves. Water going onto leaves encourages fungal growth. I want to water at the base of the plant. If I water at the base of the plant, the roots will get the water and it'll be all fine. The other thing that you want to think about once you get past the seed starting, or if I were to take any of those and I said, you know, I really want to, they're getting really big and I need to move them out of there, I need to move them into one of these pots. Anytime I move a seedling around or a plant around, I want to water it thoroughly. Moving plants is very stressful on the plants. So putting plants into here is super important. The other thing I wanted to step back for a moment, how do I heat my plants? My seedlings, I use heating mats like this. They don't cost very much. Depending on the size of it, 10, 20 bucks for it. I can put this on a timer as well, but these heating mats are really important. I cannot grow peppers or tomatoes inside without a heating mat. It's just not hot enough inside most of our houses. So then, let's say we've been successful. Let's say we've gone through all of this and you've got your seedlings, they've grown up, you've done a great job with it. Now you've got to put them out into the garden, right? The key is to remember what you're like around the same time of year. It's April, it's May, and you want to go to the beach. But where have you been for the previous 6 months? You've been inside, and what does your skin look like? Pretty pasty, right? So what do you need to be careful of when all of a sudden you're taking your pasty self and you're going out and you're going to sit on the beach? You need to be really careful about sunburn. It's the same thing with these plants. Even though these lights are super bright, it's nothing close to what the sun provides, right? So when I want to put my plants outside, I need to harden them off. And this is about a 10-day process of hardening them off. So how do I do that? I take my little greenhouse that I've created back there, take that little greenhouse, and I put that out on my front porch. Not in the direct sunlight, just in a shaded location. It's still getting more light, because it's the diffuse light that's coming in. I do that 2 days. I leave it out there for 2 hours, I bring it back inside. Then maybe the next 2 days, I take it out and for 2 hours, it gets the morning sun. Just a little bit of the morning sun, 2 hours, then I bring it back inside. The next day, it's in a place where it's gonna get 3 or 4 hours. And I slowly build that up. And that allows the plant to slowly adapt to being outside. let me talk a little bit about the seeds that we have available today. If you see seeds that are in containers like this, they're seeds that, that were harvested here locally. If you see seeds in packets like this, please only take the number of seeds that you need. How many seeds do you need to put in each paper pot if you want them to grow? Yeah, this is economy. The whole thing of put 3 seeds in and then that way you're assured of it. I put 1 pepper seed in each one of those pots back there, and they're growing up just fine. Right? You treat them right, and they'll grow up just fine. So you don't need to put 3, 4, 5 seeds in each pot. It's just wasting seeds. The other thing is, if you do happen to do that, and you get 2 seedlings coming up, then the other thing that just killed me as a new gardener, because I was like, I've got 2 plants there. I don't want to kill one of them because it's, you know, I was treating it like Sophie's Choice, which is not going to make any sense to the younger kids in here. But I was treating it like, oh man, I can't make this choice. I've got 2 plants here. I don't want to do that, but it's not Sophie's Choice. You got 2 plants growing there, and they both can't survive there. So you pick the stronger one, and then with the one that you want gone, you do not rip it out. Why? Because when you do that and rip out the soil from there, it's going to also be, its roots are intertwined with its brother or sister right next to it, and it's going to damage it. So you get your little scissors and you carefully snip it off, and you let the one survive. And it will survive and grow into a healthy plant, and it will do much better than if you try and do that and then you have 2 plants that don't have the resources that they need, and neither one of them does well. So it's just, you got to cull it out, and without remorse either. Just be ruthless about it. Feel like Oprah here. You're going to get a greenhouse. You're going to get a greenhouse. You're going to get a greenhouse. Each one of you is going to get one of these plastic specialty greenhouses. It's really simple, but you can fit 18 of those newspaper pots in here. So you can put 3 by 6 in here, fill it out like that. Put one of these on there, and then label each row that you're going to do. I recommend, if you want something, plant 3 of them. You know, just go ahead and plant 3 of them and try that out. Don't just plant 1, but you can do it however you want. And then when you get home, with my peppers, what I do is I have some clear lids. Now the ones that I have for you back there are white, so they won't work for this. But you can do the same thing that I do with Saran wrap until they come up. You don't want to make it airtight, but you do want to keep the moisture in there like a greenhouse does. Greenhouses are not airtight. If you make it airtight, you'll get mold in there, and it won't turn out well for you. But you can crack it every day and let some fresh air in. I just put this down over the top of it. Light gets in, the warmth gets in from underneath if I want to heat it, and they germinate really, really well. Once they start germinating, I take this off and I let free air exchange so it can get that carbon dioxide that it wants and that I don't want in my house, right? Thanks for joining us for another edition of From the Learning Garden. If you'd like any more information about seed starting, you can contact the Virginia Cooperative Extension Office at 890-4940. Alternatively, you can go online to yorkcounty.gov/VCE for Virginia Cooperative Extension. Thanks so much, and I look forward to seeing you next time.